comes up lots of times. I don't think sellers have, maybe they haven't thought about the process, or they haven't been thinking about the process as they've lived in the home, as far as when they go to sell it, there's going to be some things that they're going to need to do, even from a selling a property in the state of Iowa DOT, or the not DOT, DNR perspective on septics and wells. So what's something seller needs to be aware of if they're going to go sell their house with those?
So the first thing that you have to do is get your septic system inspected. And that is required by the DNR. You cannot get around that, and that is a seller's responsibility. It typically costs between $600 and $850, but that does include pumping it. If you don't want it pumped, which they do suggest doing that every few years, just depending on your house size and everything, but if you don't want it pumped, you can do the septic inspection for a little less, more like the $250 to $300 range. But getting it pumped is something good, especially if you're selling it, just to say that you've had that part of it done. Then they issue what is called a time of transfer document, which is something that you have to have with the sale. And it is nice too, because then they come out and they diagram out exactly where like your leach field is, and they tell you what kind of septic system you do have, so that if you have any issues with it, then you're familiar and you can call and say, you know, I have this and this, and what do you suggest? Or if I'm having issues with it, then they can help you a little bit more if you were to need fixing with it. Another aspect of it to think about too is if you are listing your house for sale and you're heading into like fall and winter, if you have issues, then you will have to probably escrow money to do any kind of repairs for a septic, just because they can't access it in the winter if they have to dig anything up. So that's something that a lot of people don't think about, is if you're heading into fall and you're thinking about listing, then you might want to just get on top of getting your septic inspected. Yeah.
And on the septic, when you're selling a house in Iowa, DNR requires a time of transfer done by a DNR time of transfer certified inspector. And they're good for 2 years. And so if like Rachel said, if you're heading into, late summer, early fall, and you're set that you're going to sell your home, versus some people might list it just to see if they can get something for it. But if you're set that you're going to sell your home, I would say you'd want to get that done. Because then if you don't get an offer for 2 months or 3 months, and then they want to close another 2 or 3 months out, and it's all of a sudden you go from, listing in August, and all of a sudden it's January the next year, like you said, they might not be able to, they're probably not going to be able to do that inspection at that point. And so then the buyer's lender side might say, well, we want to escrow a bunch of money in case we have to replace it or whatever it is. So doing that up front helps the seller just have that done, so they don't have to worry about it a little bit later. And again, it's good for 2 years. It's not like you have to, if you have it and then it doesn't sell till next summer, it's still good for 2 years. Right.
And replacement of a septic is 10 to 15,000 roughly, just depending on what kind of septic system you do have. So it could end up being a lot of money that you'd have to escrow if they find that you would have some kind of an issue.
Yeah, and if the bank, if a lender's going to escrow for that, it's typically going to be 150% of the bid. So if it's 15,000, you're looking at 22,500 that they're going to want to escrow for. So along with that, a question, I guess, thinking through that is when you're helping a seller sell and they have a septic, do you advise the seller to get it done right away, regardless of the time, and why would that be?
If it's something you have to do anyway, so there's no point in putting it off. So it's just one of those things that if you just do it in advance, and it's not something you're going to have to mess with once you do have somebody that's made you an offer, or if you're in the middle of a deal, then too, if you have, if they're saying that it has to be replaced, well, you're going to have to replace it then, even if somebody doesn't buy it now and they buy it in 5 years, you have to do that work. So then you just know what you're dealing with, and then it won't prolong the sale or anything at closing. So
yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking as well, is I think it's better to have it done right away, because the issues. And so you don't want to be, as a seller, in that situation where all of a sudden you feel like you've given a little bit more than you wanted to on price, and now the septic issue comes up, versus if you took care of that on the front end, and then if you had to fix something, or you have it pumped, you do those things, those actually can turn into a positive, where on your description or to to the buyers, you can let them know, look, we already had it. We had it inspected, you know, it passed, or we had it pumped, or we had these 2 or 3 things done. We had to put a new distribution box in, whatever it is. That looks like a positive to that buyer versus maybe some of the other places like, well, they haven't had that inspected yet. What if they have issues?
Right.
You know, is the deal going to fall apart because they're not going to be willing to do something now that may cost money?
That's a very good point. Yes, for sure.
So what about wells? So we talked about septic. What about the wells?
So one thing, when you do make an offer on the on your purchase agreement, you can put in there that you want to do water testing. You can have it subject to water testing. It's just a kit that you can get through your local health department, and you typically just have to send it in, and they send it to a lab to be tested. You can find different things in your water, just kind of depending on where you're at. One of the things that they really watch out for is like arsenic and lead, different runoff from the field that you can have from different kinds of chemicals. So I think you just can never be too cautious when you're dealing with, you know, if you're near farmland where somebody's constantly spraying the land and doing different pesticides and things like that. So it's like a $25 kit, I want to say. And it's literally just a sample from your faucet that you just take right to the lab to get tested. So.
And there isn't anything in place like there is with the DNR on that you have to have it tested. Yeah,
that's completely up to you. And that's something that you do on your own. I know I've done them for clients before just because it's just easier for me to deal with. But yeah, there's no specifications to it like there is a septic system.
Yep. And along those same lines, it's better for the seller to do that right away in case they know that they're going to have to replace something.
Very true.
That they know that right away.
Yeah.
Or if they're going to have the well shocked or whatever need to be done to treat it. Yep.
Yeah, very true.
So spending some prep time right away if you're selling an acreage to have the septic and the well and all those things tested and know what your potential cost is to get it up to par to transfer the title is something that maybe that sellers should really be thinking about.
Yes, definitely. Yep.